My name is Iain Dickson. I'm the Impact and Learning Manager at BirdLife International Global Secretariat, and I'm here to talk to you about how taking the scaling challenge has helped us think through our work on preventing the illegal killing of birds in the Mediterranean. And I'm going to particularly focus on two ways that taking the scaling challenge has really, or we feel, has helped us to better sort of define and plan our work. So just to give you an idea of IKB in an eggshell rather than a nutshell, it's a complex problem. It's a leading cause of mortality for a number of bird species in the region. It applies in multiple countries across the region. We know that the problem is particularly concentrated in hotspots where a disproportionate amount of that killing takes place. But we also know that the combination of threats and drivers that you get at a particular hotspot, or even more broadly across a national context, are different. It's typically through a combination of trapping, sometimes for food, sometimes for the pet trade, a combination of hunting, targeting particular species, and there's also poisoning involved, targeting species like vultures, other birds of prey as a means of livestock protection. So although these threats broadly do apply across the region, the particular mix of threats and drivers and who's perpetrating it and the motivations behind those differ with each site, which creates real challenges in developing and coordinating a unified approach, which we realize is necessary because to actually address the problem, you need to be thinking at a regional scale, particularly as a lot of these species are migratory. So in order to or to try and address this problem at scale, we operate as a partnership. So we have international focused organizations involved in the partnership. BirdLife is one. There are a number of others represented in the learning network. There are Euranatur and the Vulture Conservation Foundation. And then we have national partner organizations. So those are independent national civil society organizations which are sort of deeply embedded in their national context. So they deliver the action at local and national scale, and then there's sort of international level coordination and partner-to-partner exchange within that network. And in putting that together, we have generally faced a challenge as a partnership in developing and applying locally appropriate solutions, while also sort of achieving that sort of visibility and regional scale oversight, coordination, and impact. So what I want to talk about today is two ways that we think that taking the scaling challenge has helped us with those things that I was just talking about. So the first of them is how the scaling challenge is helping us to define, refine and improve our strategies for addressing illegal killing at national scale. So scaling up from the current level of effort and impact, where we have national partners focused on tackling illegal killing at a subset of hotspots, to thinking about how you scale up your impact so that you can address illegal killing at a scale that actually makes a significant difference. So whether that's covering all the hotspots within a country, or you achieve sort of a more widespread reduction in a threat where that's more diffuse across the landscape, as is the case for poisoning. In terms of a core concept, we've been working on this for a while, and I would say that they're usually addressed through a combination of work on policy, delivering stronger legislation, trying to improve enforcement, and then trying to increase the number of eyes on the ground who are reporting and detecting illegal killing. And so that it's an interplay between those strategies that together sort of delivers a unified approach to addressing IKB. So training those who are willing to detect and report illegal killing, training and empowering enforcement, forensic and judiciary officers to investigate, prosecute and convict, and then to back that up, strengthening the legal framework to ensure enforceability and foster accountability. So as I said, so in tackling IKB, it's usually through a combination of these things that we've been working on for some time. So to rather than sort of go through the partnership one by one, we're going to use the example of illegal killing in Croatia to demonstrate how taking the scaling challenge has helped to refine our approach for addressing the problem at national level. So through taking the scaling challenge, it was relatively straightforward to identify who our primary actors are. So in Croatia, it's primarily hunters and farmers. Trapping is less of an issue in this particular country. So it's hunters, primarily hunting sort of quail and waterfowl, and then farmers who are involved in the illegal poisoning of birds. Through assessing assessing those primary actors, we determined that the overall tilt here is so steeply uphill. There are a number of deeply entrenched behavioral norms among the perpetrators and other key stakeholders, and there are a lack of effective deterrents for those target behaviors. So we've very quickly assessed that working directly with these primary actors and changing that behavior is going to be very challenging, which leads us to focus on our secondary actors, which are enforcement agencies and the judiciary, who, through detection and prosecution, provide enough of a deterrence to deter our primary actors from engaging in IKB. So we know from both the effectiveness review that we carried out as part of the learning network, and from experience, that this can be a highly effective approach. We have one component of the partnership is the Wildlife Crime Academy, which trains enforcement agencies and members of the judiciary to detect, prosecute, and convict. And so we know that there has been some success there, and there's some initial signs of success applying that approach in Croatia as well. So we think this is quite a feasible strategy to take forward. Also thinking about the tertiary actors in Croatia, which are the policymakers who, through adopting and applying adequate and effective policies for IKB, then that leads to the enforcement agencies having the capacity and resources they need to be held accountable. In Croatia, this is currently rated uphill, but we do know from evidence in other countries that it's not necessarily impossible. So I'll get to the interplay and how these issues play out in different countries in a minute, but just to say, it's rated steeply uphill, but we do know that this can be a feasible approach. So we think it's worth spending our time still working on this particular barrier. There are also some other secondary actors involved, which in this case are the people who live and work in areas where illegal killing is happening. So we know as well through our effectiveness review that it is possible to identify a limited cohort of people with working and living within those sites who are willing and able to detect and report. So there's a strategy there around training those individuals to detect and report, which then supports the work of the other secondary actors, the enforcement agencies, to carry out their job. So we know, again, that this is something that's feasible and doable, and it could be done through a replication approach. So although developing a discrete behavior change strategy for local actors at all those sites would be very, very, very difficult, just focusing on training the willing to detect and report IKB, that is a replicable strategy for Croatia anyway. So say through that approach and through that focused analysis of those target actors, it's helping us think more about what sensible thresholds might be for achieving our scaling objectives. So when it comes to training enforcement and judiciary agents, thinking about how many need to be trained. In the context of Croatia, if you were to look at all of those involved in detecting and enforcing and convicting cases of illegal killing, there are 17 judiciary officials and about 115 enforcement officers, which is not inconceivable that you could reach that many through training. In terms of monitoring, we probably don't need to achieve effective monitoring at all hotspots in Croatia, so they're thinking about what a threshold, what a sensible threshold is there to try and achieve a significant increase in detection and reporting, and then thinking about what it would make sense in terms of what percentage of cases of illegal killing need to be investigated and convicted in order to deliver a powerful deterrent. So we have some initial thinking around this, but again, through taking the scaling challenge, it's really helping us to focus in on both how these different pathways and strategies interlink, which hasn't always been clear in the past, and also doing the math to think what realistic and sensible and feasible thresholds we should be achieving for in order to deliver impact at scale. So that's talking about how the scaling challenge has supported us at national level. I want to talk a little bit about how I think, or we feel, it is contributing to our strategy for our longer term ambition, which is to address illegal killing at scale across the region. And as I said, one thing we've struggled with is developing a unified approach that allows you to zoom in and zoom out of the detail of specific national and local context while still retaining that overall oversight. And I think taking the scaling challenge is helping us to do that. So if we have our Again, so through that approach of identifying our primary, tertiary, secondary actors, how those interlink, the different scaling approaches you apply, I think that's provided us with a much more focused and sort of targeted theory of change that we can use as a framework. Through an assessment of tilt and barriers at different points in that framework, I think that provides a very powerful way of sort of assessing it within one country, but then also helping us to tailor the approach for other countries. So this was the assessment done in relation to Croatia. If we use the same framework, but apply the same exercise of assessing tilt and barriers to a different country, in this case Cyprus, we find that the assessment of the tilt on our tertiary actors, policymakers, is more flat than uphill. Likewise, for our secondary actors, it's more downhill than flat. So again, it helps us to tailor our approach for this particular context while still retaining that sort of overall sort of big picture framework, which I think is potentially a really significant step forward in how we think about and coordinate some of these initiatives. As I said, yes, and then this is an example of that sort of threshold exercise applied to a different country where you're applying a similar approach, similar combination of strategies, but your thresholds might be different. But again, it makes it easier to compare, contrast, sort of combine, and, as I say, maintain oversight across a really diverse and complex portfolio. The final thing I want to talk about is that the scaling challenge has given us an opportunity to try and really define the added value of working in partnership. We talk a lot about why working in partnership is a good approach for addressing an issue like illegal killing. We would say it's essential. None of these organizations would be able to achieve meaningful impact on their own, so there's a need to collaborate together. But we often struggle to define and measure and test and sort of communicate the added value of that. And thinking about it in the context of the partnership's contribution to scaling, we've been finding it's quite a useful lens to view that through. So through this project, sort of we developed a sort of a rough theory of change where organizations become part of the partnership. There are a number of conditions that partnership needs to meet in order to achieve a number of benefits which subsequently contribute to scaling. I won't go into detail about what those are just now, but we've been testing these using the partners in the learning network. So thinking about the extent that the IKB partnership has developed or delivered increased funding, increased legitimacy, economies of scale, knowledge and wisdom in the context of IKB, and started to match those to map the specific contribution of those to those scaling approaches as a means of sort of getting a bit smarter about how we define, test, and measure the effectiveness of our partnerships. And then applying that logic to the exercise we were talking about earlier, I think also helps us identify where the partnership can really add value in the context of changing and shifting tilt in relation to key barriers. So thinking about where enhanced legitimacy and coordination can help lower barriers to policy adoption, thinking about how evidence and learning from one part of the partnership in relation to enforcement or in relation to behavior change can be applied in a specific national context. So combining that with the exercise we were talking about, sort of tilt and barriers before, and then also mapping the potential ways that the partnership can contribute to removing or enhancing those barriers or enablers, again, is something that I think is both, it represents a step forward for our IKB approach, but is also potentially highly relevant for other partnership initiatives as well. So I'm quite excited about this approach. Discussing with others about, we've developed a sort of modified version of the conservation standards, but if we wanted to go one step further and develop, a partnership version of healthy country planning or something like that, a framework for making these partnerships work effectively and allowing you to zoom in and out of scale while still retaining the overall oversight is something I think is really quite excited about the potential that provides for us. And we also know from our review that there is an awful lot that we can improve about how the partnership functions. But again, being a lot more specific about what that might be. So if we want to invest in knowledge and information sharing between members of the partnership, thinking about how to make those exchanges happen, whether you hold workshops or webinars, or whether you focus more on peer-to-peer exchanges between partners with similar contexts or who are working on similar things. So in summary, the scaling challenge has, through assessing tilt and barriers and enablers, helped us clarify the linkages between these different areas of work and clarify what our core concept is. Doing the math is helping us to identify societal thresholds that are impactful and achievable. The sort of overall framework and the assessment of tilt and barriers is providing us a means, I think a more effective means of adjusting our approach for local and national context while retaining that overall oversight. And it's also helped us to define, test, and further develop our approach for working in partnership, which, as I said, has significant implications for approaches for initiatives beyond IKB. So that's it from me. That wasn't a whole overview of everything we've done as part of the Learning Network, but hopefully gives you an idea of just two of the ways that taking the scaling challenge has been helping us as organizations, as a partnership to deliver impact at scale. Thank you.